Tejal Shah, an artist from India who is with the majority, I would say almost all of her work, very much thematizing gender issues. And we are very happy that Tejal is with us and that she was willing to show her very beautiful, but for some maybe also disturbing work on the beauty of love.
So the work that I'm presenting is actually inside that room. It's called Between the Waves, the entire project. It's actually a 5-channel video installation, but here presented as a 2-channel, again because of lack of maybe space and technology and things like that. So even I'm seeing it installed like this for the first time, and it still looks very good, so I'm happy. What I would like to share with you about the work is that it's as Katya said earlier, a lot of my work was based around gender, around feminism, around queer issues. And in my early works, let's say, these issues were more burning and more in the forefront. And as things were changing around me within the Indian society, and I guess you also move forward in the ways you express things, I think my focus also started to shift on looking at how can queer feminism meet a certain understanding of interspecies, ecosexuality, looking at some of the ideas in Buddhist philosophy, and post-pornography. So somewhere I wanted all to make a soup of all of these things that I was thinking about, and very much out of a place of love and creation, and not in antagonism to any structure or any ism. I was in conversation with my gallerist in Bombay for almost a year and a half, because this project was shown in Documenta last year, so I was working on it for a year and a half, and we were very clear that we will make the exhibition in Bombay. What we had to do, of course, was consult lawyers, have lawyers on board. The exhibition could not be publicized in any media. It was by invitation only. So if you are not on the list, your name, you can't come in, and you have to sign a form saying, you know, whatever, you take responsibility for yourself to come and see this work. So it showed under limitations, but the fact that and it was for a very short period of time, it was for like 4 days or 5 days. So it showed under limitations, but I think it's the idea how to find the ways in different spaces to maybe, you know, I've even shown it in a friend's living room in Cairo with like 15 people just sitting there with bad sound, bad projection. It doesn't matter. Like in that situation, there was no chance I could show this work outside. So it's just finding creative solutions. This idea of, you know, is the artist exoticized? For doesn't matter what work they make, whether it's political or unpolitical, whether it's colorful or not colorful, whatever the politics of the work be, then maybe there is this currency attached that if you are from the exotic other, perhaps your work shows in the West in certain contexts. Yes, this can happen. No, this may not happen. This can happen as a very meaningful cultural exchange. This can happen as a very rubbish, meaningless exchange. And sometimes even things that are meaningless can have some other meaningful outcome which you did not plan for, because there's always an excess. And so it's really hard to say. And the only thing I can say is that maybe if I'm aware of the embedded politics within the work and within my positionality, both at home and maybe, so to speak, outside of home, even though I would like to hope that for everybody the whole world could be their home, but this is not a reality.
October Salon has a long-standing tradition in visual arts, and to have comics included in it is a big step for the medium of comics. So for me, that means more than anything. My name is Nina, and what you see before me or behind me exhibited are the 4 pages for my upcoming graphic novel called Fatherland, as well as the large print. The book is not going to be that big. We just enlarged it for the purpose of the exhibition. Fatherland deals with my early childhood and the history of my family. So in order to understand this a little bit more, perhaps I should say something about my family, specifically about my father, who is pictured on the cover of the book. My father belonged to a secret organization, terrorist organization, called Freedom for the Serbian Fatherland, which operated in the United States and in Canada in the 1960s and 1970s. They had, it was an anti-communist group. Their aim was to bring down Tito's government. He lived in Canada in political exile, which is why he eventually got involved with the group. And for those of you who may not know about it, one of the leaders of the group, his name was Nikola Kavaja, dedicated his life to killing Tito. In 1977, my father died in a mysterious explosion while attempting an attack at the Yugoslavian embassy in Toronto. My life and the family life is torn between 2 ideologies. The paternal side, which is nationalistic, right-wing, and the left-wing side, communist, partisan. This book will reflect how this duality affected my family, because I did not really know much about my father until I moved to Canada in 1990. Now, I was born, all of my siblings and I were born in Canada, but when I was a toddler, we moved to Zemun. So since the theme of the show is No One Belongs Here More Than You, I chose to exhibit 4 pieces which were the openers of 4 different chapters, and they show 4 different cities that I lived in my life. The story, which is so based on patriarch about my father, was told and narrated by women in my life. So the entire book was done through conversations with my mother, conversations with my maternal grandmother, and with my father's aunt.
Only at some point you will get to, you will find out that these are both women. But like what I would say, it's a constant in Andy's work. It's that by the way, not unlike pop art, he basically grabs the images which are not usually not supposed to be painted, which are, so to say, not worth of the oil on canvas. Artists trained as a painter, but since I think the last 20 years working with many different media on a very conceptual basis. With us this time, Milica Tomic developed, out of the interviews that she conducted, the emotional relation towards the food. What does this tell about our society and the change that our society experienced, especially in ex-Yugoslavia in the last 20 years. On their relation towards cooking, towards food, as you know, cooking and food is very female connoted, and it's a everyday, so to say, in everyday life. There are in many cultures, women's the one who nurture the family, who prepare food.
This is a really recent work that I've just made about a month ago. It's part of a series of video animations. This series is called To Whom Does the World Belong? Ili Kome Pripada Svijet. The title references the title of the film Kula Vampe, which was made in the 30s by a collective including Brecht, Zudo and several others. Experiments in questions. So the first video that's here is called The State and of the body. The second one that's not shown here is called the body economic. And then the third one, there'll be probably more, but the third one's called the audience member, or I think it actually works even better in Serbo-Croat, which is član publike.
There are several projects in this room. So one is a calendar, which is not my work. It is a collaborative work of a group for development of Syrian news named Zaytun. Zaytun means olive, and it was until now it was based in Cairo. It was one of the main places where Syrian artists and people could flee from the horrible regime of al-Assad. And they did this calendar last year, and it is about children's workshop they did or we did, and about traumatized children's drawings who were in northern Syria during the massacres committed by Bashar al-Assad in 2011 after the beginning of the revolution. And on the other hand, it is about this artist who suffered most. It is about the artist who suffered most in the first year of the revolution, like Wael Kaston. He was tortured. He's from Homs. He was a modernist sculptor and very much into the female or feminist issues. And his scene was that he made a common exhibition with the Syrian revolutionary youth, so that they took him to prison and they tortured him, and he died. So this is all these artists. They were one of the main target groups of the regime, and we hope that the system will change after a few weeks, as it happened at the beginning in Egypt or Tunis. And now, after 933 days from the beginning of the revolution, there are mainly men only on the street because women are raped. Rape is one of the main weapons of the regime, so you see mainly men. At the same time, half of the Syrian population has fled the country, so there are about 10 million refugees in the neighboring countries, and I mean, feminist issue is not the main issue for us, because in the moment when there are 100,000 people killed and 400,000 detained, these particular identities are not so important as the general human rights. So this is the most important, but still, since we are in this exhibition, I can mention some this strange paradox that in the countries women has in a horrible situation. They cannot leave the house, but in exile, the women are in a more powerful situation than before, because, as I perceived, they can adapt faster to terrible conditions. So in many families, only the woman works in Turkey as a cleaning lady, and all the men are unemployed. The days since the revolution started, and I hope I can end one day when the regime is will be gone, and when I can return to Syria. The drawing, it was at the beginning I planned it, this UN with the women's shoes. I had a series of female UN uniforms, and in 2011 I thought I would collect many women from all over the world, and we would go into Syria and demonstrate for democratic change and for social justice and against secular violence. But then, when I continued this series with the female UN uniform, it became somehow sarcastic, because of course it was not possible to go into the country, because we would have been just shot by the regime as all the other people. And the other project is on these are websites like QR codes for Syria. It would take a much longer lecture to speak about it. We collected hundreds of Syrian independent initiatives. All of us who are expatriates, we can only respect those who are still in the country or working in the refugee camps, and we try to give a voice to them. So I have to emphasize that this is not my work. And
we actually, as a monument group who discuss about possibility of building monument and to deal with history through it, actually starting to work on project Four Faces of Omorsk, which was actually started from the one from the critique couple from Omorsk, from Pavle Levi, the member of the group. We actually start to look what this site mean, Omorska. This was a concentration camp in Bosnia in '92. And after that, he was transformed. It was originally it was a social mining complex, and during the war in Bosnia, it was a concentration camp, and then it was transformed into site for the making the big blockbuster Saint Georgi ubivaš Dahu, said George killing the dragon. I'm sorry. And after that, it was privatized and owned by the ArcelorMittal. So the other, why we put it, the problem, the huge problem was why we put it together. This site of Staros concentration, former concentration camp Omorska, together with Staro Sajmište, which was concentration camp from the Second World War, actually was. Not to put it in the connection in historical terms and in the structure of the concentration camp, but to put into question the way of memorization and the way of dealing with the politics of negation and politics of memory.
Myself, Rachel, and Brad. My work is collaborative, has always been collaborative, and in the last few years has been more and more collective practice. So the politics around collaboration, around collective practice, and all of these terms, whether it's museum, whether it's participation, they're terms which are never taken as transparent or given or neutral. They're highly contested spaces and histories and geographies. So the Museum of Non-Participation actually came into being and it is a privilege, the privilege of crossing the border from India to Pakistan, to cross that border, to be in Pakistan, to be there at the height of the lawyers' movement. Ancestrally, paradigmatically shifted my perspective. So this project, really another way of saying this project, it starts there, it has deep roots, but really it's a project for me that is critical and criticises the kind of globalised spread of...
It's been a long project, and earlier this year Karen and I started to talk about focusing a new strand of the work which looks at women's bodies within the concept of the Museum of Non-Participation, and women's bodies as a site of resistance, and that's not just in our own lifetimes and in our own experiences, but also ancestrally, and to go back beyond recent feminism to the birth of the women's movement, which we see as the birth of capitalism, and how women have resisted for centuries and centuries, and very powerfully so. So to kind of bring our ancestral resistance into the present and to connect with that amongst women, and so that's what this is the beginning of a long piece of work.
It's called Deep State, and for those of you that know, the term originated in Turkey. So it's a term, derin devlet, that was used and is used in terms of a very popular term about the state within the state, and the state which is this unelected forces, so a very kind of deep, unelected set of corrupt power relations. And at that time, everybody said the Arabic Egyptian word was mustahil. It's impossible to speak about resistance. You can only speak about resilience in terms of the Egyptian context. Egypt is resilient, Egyptians are resilient.
Lorena is originally from Mexico City, but hasn't lived in Mexico since the last 17 years. And next year she's planning her return to Mexico together with her family. It's pachanga meaning, as Lorena said, translation would be roadie celebration. It's a come together, a party. So as you see, this floor in the exhibition, it's quite concerned with the sociability, with different kinds of people being together.
The ones on the stairways, the shoes, and the other piece are also mine. I'm mainly sculptor, what I said, no? But I don't know what I will become when I go to Mexico. Yeah, I work with materials, and most of the time I work with materials I haven't worked before, because I try to realize ideas or images that are missing for me.
Disco-like installation. It is some sort of a reenactment of a real nightclub. The pictures were taken in Vicenza, in Balkan disco. There are a couple of Balkan discos across Europe. This was a new fashion after the breakup of Yugoslavia, that lots of these nightclubs that were playing Balkan music opened up. So today it represents a place where you have fun. So also, yeah, this work is a lot more about socialization, because when the opening was, there was also gin tonic, and people could have a taste of a real night out. So it was also a nice thing to see how it communicates with the audience.
And with her latest work that we show here, which is an embroidery, this is a work which as our curatorial practice, so also the work by Lana emerged out of urgency, her personal urgency, as a reaction to the world and to the everyday she is facing. In this particular case, as a female artist, born and working in a region of post-Yugoslavia, in a very specific Bosnian condition, even if almost 20 years after the war, still post-war a condition in institutional, material, emotional, everyday sense. So in a sense, why we decided, even though the works that deal with problems of art systems are basically downstairs, positioned downstairs, as this artistic act of the embroidery, it's also related to our as curatorial collective tribute, to our fight as women, as human beings, as curators, as theoreticians, as cleaning ladies, as sex workers, as directors, as writers, as lesbians, as mothers, as sisters, as fathers, as and so forth.